Okay, hello everyone. This is the first official episode of The Light of Insight, where I have my first guest, who is someone that's very, very special to me and who I would say has guided me through many difficult stages throughout my life. And that is my grandmother, Carol Gamble. Hello, Grandma.
There, Nina. So good to see your lovely face.
So good to see you. So, just for some context right now, I am living in Tokyo and it's about 10:45 a.m. And my grandma lives in Montana, what's the time in Montana,
It
Grandma?
is because we're on daylight savings time. It's now 7:44 p.m. So it's
7:44.
still light outside in Montana, but it's getting dark.
It's getting dark. And how is the weather today?
Oh, it was beautiful. In Fahrenheit, it was 60 degrees. So that's good.
Oh,
Spring is
that's
here.
so nice. Spring
Yeah,
is coming. Spring is
spring
coming.
is. Yeah.
So this relationship that I have with my grandma, um, again, it's super important to me. And the Light of Insight is something that I wanted to create because I wanted a space for people to discuss growth stories and how to live a more aligned, happy lifestyle. And my grandma was the first one I thought about who I wanted to have a conversation with about stories of growth and lessons of life. So, the first question, and I guess where I want to begin, is to ask Grandma, can you just share some of your story with us, specifically starting off with your background and where you grew up?
I can. It's interesting because when I think about the relationship that I had growing up with the relationship you had growing up, totally different because I grew up on in a small, close to a small town, and I lived on a farm. And we raised cattle and chickens. In fact, some today I was asked the question, "What was your first job?" And I said, "My first job was picking or getting eggs out of our hen house." And I hated that job because the chickens are not wonderful. They would always peck at me as I was, I'm a young girl. So I'm 7, 6, 7, 8, and I'm having to do that before I go to school. And my school is a small country school, and we only had about 8 children in the entire school, and
Oh,
that was for all grades. So I had the experience of growing up listening to older children who were in the 8th grade, and I was in the 1st grade, and I was really anxious to go to school. I always wanted to be able to learn. So that was kind of my growing up years. When I got to high school, I went to a larger city of about 7,000 people and graduated from high school there. And then from there, when I graduated, I went to what's called the University of Montana. And that was a large school. There were about 12,000 people in that school. And I went into nursing, and that's where I got my nursing degree eventually. So then I graduated and got married and was a nurse. So
mm.
that was my,
So, kind of going back, can you explain your family, like how big your family was and how many brothers and sisters you had?
yes.
Or
As I said, it was a farming family. So my mother, she always said she was just a housewife, which always, as I got older, I found that to be kind of insulting because my mother really did so much as a farm wife. And she did all of the necessary paperwork. And all of us, I mean, at a very young age, I had my mother, my father, 3 older brothers, and a younger sister. So there was a lot of food preparation. Harvest season, which was in the early fall of the year, um, all of us, I mean, I knew how to drive by the time I was 9 or 10 years old. And by the time my brothers had left, they were older. By the time they left and went on to start their lives, I was still maybe 13, and I was driving a big wheat truck, hauling wheat to the store or to the granary and all of that. So as far as growing up years, and also we learned a lot about life through animals. Not just through the cattle, but through, we had ducks and we had chickens, as I said before, and we had lambs. So it was kind of, when I look back, it was kind of an idyllic life. And we as children were able to do kind of whatever we wanted. And we had a very lovely home. In my perception, it was a lovely home. And we had parents who were very caring about us, and also, I just had a really fine growing up years because of that. So, and relatives close by, uncles and aunts, cousins, all of that.
Yeah. Can you also explain culturally where your family immigrated from before coming to?
I certainly can. It's interesting that you asked that question, Nina, because I always say I am so German. There is nothing but German blood. My grandmother came from Austria when she was 19. She immigrated to this country into the United States, and she didn't know any English. And I'm not certain that would have been in the early 1900s, I think. And I'm not really certain why she decided to come that early, but I think life was difficult in Austria and Germany, and her family was having a difficult time. So she had a brother that lived here, and they came all the way over. That was on my mother's side of the family. My other grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was a baby when she came to this country from Germany too. So in the last few years, I've chosen to do some a look at how the ships they came over, and really looking into the genealogy. And as I just said, grandfathers, grandmothers, all very German. And so, I mean, that's just what it was. In fact, my grandmother could always speak German, from the time she was little. They learned a lot of German. My maternal grandmother said she learned English from reading the Bible because of the woman that she worked with. So those are all the stories that I grew up with. And it was always, as you may know, I mean, German people are known for being industrious, working hard, that kind of culture that they grew up with. The First World War was very hard, as was the Second World War, because I remember my mother talking about having to get rid of anything that looked German when she was growing up, and burning books, getting rid of any German books too. So that was something that we didn't talk a lot about, but I always knew that it was there.
This is so interesting, Grams. I'm thinking about your journey with this genealogy and looking into your family history quite recently. I would say maybe the past 10 years, you really started to dive deep into this genealogy. What has this taught you, like looking into your family history and understanding, I guess, your big life puzzle and context more? What has it provided you with?
That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about, I guess it was curiosity on my part, but it also allowed me to realize just how much heritage probably and the culture of where I came from influenced my upbringing. Because again, both of my mother and my father and my grandparents were all very industrious. And that was just a given that we all worked hard and we were to accomplish things. And I can honestly say all my siblings did. Everybody in our family accomplish things. So it was a
Mm,
given. The other thing I always think about, Nina, it's so funny because women in my culture, I mean, my age group, we were expected to go through school, grow up, perhaps get a job. My mother always said, well, you might want to get a job or profession. And she suggested nursing, which is what I did, and my sister too. And the
mm,
reason she always said that was because you never know when something might happen and your husband might not be around. It was always related to our husbands and might not be around. So you would have to figure out how to provide for your family. And so that was just the given. And we really didn't have a lot of choices. Women my age were allowed to become, I mean, encouraged. Really, we had like three professions. We could be nurses, teachers, secretaries. That was kind of the choices we had. And beauticians too, I guess, but that would have been far down on my list of what I chose. So it's interesting how those formulas were all planned for us. And it worked. But I always, and I know I've told you this, I don't think I would have been a nurse if I would have grown up in your generation.
yes, I always remember you telling me this, and it's so interesting that gender aspect was such a big part in for your generation and choosing your career paths. And this is so funny. I wrote down this question, which you just answered. What was the decision making process of choosing nursing as your career?
Mhm.
But you kind of just touched on this. What do you think you maybe would have been if gender or kind of nursing wasn't pushed
I,
towards you?
I
What do you
really
think?
thought about that because I do think I would have been in a more creative. When I first started thinking about this very issue, I thought, oh, I would have loved to have done graphic design, something more
Mm,
artistic, something more in that area. I don't know about writing books, but certainly that would have been something I would have enjoyed doing. So and of course, then, in my later years, with the encouragement of your dad, I did do some video production and I loved
yes.
it. I loved that. So I
Yes,
did
I
get a chance
remember.
at a time in my life to do something creative.
Yes. Just for context too, grandma, she's been since I was little taken so many pictures and videos of all of us five grandkids. And I think that because you've been able to provide us with all those memories, it really has made our family stronger. Just whenever we come together and whenever we're able to look back on pictures and videos, those memories are so, so special. And they are really because of you, Grandma. You've always made it such a priority every time to get that big video camera out. I don't even know what year that camera was.
I don't
Oh my
know.
gosh, but I just remember always grandma carrying it in Christmas time or Easter time. And usually what would happen, so where I grew up in Montana, Missoula, it was about a 3 hour car ride to Great Falls. So it was super easy for my family growing up to visit grandma and grandpa, as well as my cousins who live in Billings, Montana, which is a little bit farther, but I would say what, a 5 hour
Five.
car,
Mhm.
car ride to Great Falls. So it was so easy for us to plan family get-togethers. But as we get older, of course, and all of us grandkids doing different things, and now I'm living in Tokyo, it's been much harder to come together as a family. But having those pictures and videos really means so much to me. So
That's
thank you,
here.
Grandma.
What's interesting about that is my mother was a perpetual photo journalist too, because
Oh, I didn't know that.
in my I inherited them all. So at someday, I mean, I have all of the photographs, all black and white, of course, that
Yeah.
she took when she was young. So interesting.
That is interesting. I love that. So, my next question for you, Grams, is you have shown me through example the importance of community and friendship.
Mhm.
And I'm really curious to know what community and friendship feels like and means to you.
Yeah, and I think you and I've talked before about some of that has to do with um, whether we're more introverted or extroverted. And
Mhm.
I found myself to need a community and to need people. And so I have always, and I've been fortunate enough to live in the city that we're in now, Great Falls, Montana, for many years. As you know, your grandpa's a teacher, so when he got a teaching job here, and your dad and your auntie were little, um, we moved to Great Falls. In fact, your auntie was born here, and so that's been in the 1960s that we've moved here. And in that many years, I have established a network of friends that even now, and I can even project and tell you that how important it is during these times of COVID, that
Mm.
isolation was so hard for me personally. But we have so many, we have phones, we have all the different kinds of
Technology.
services. Yeah, that I was always able to connect. But as depressing as it was, I always knew that I had friends out there that I could connect with. So that part was important. I've kind of lost track of what you really wanted to know about that, but I know that having good friends and learning from friends
Yes.
and observing, and I always think that um, we need to. In all those years that I worked, I learned so much from the patients. I worked on a psychiatric unit for nearly 30 years, and watching patients who were going through really traumas in their life, and perhaps mental illness is a big part of why they were there, that I could always learn something from them. And some of that had to do with decisions I would make regarding how I would approach things too. So saying, I don't think that would be a good choice for me to make. So, and I even think about that now, Nina, with so many young people who are looking at drugs and alcohol, and so many dangerous drugs, more than alcohol, perhaps. And what a critical error that is in their families. I mean, in their
Yeah.
lives, in their personal lives. So
Yeah.
I can't remember where we were going with that, but that always comes to mind. What we can learn
Absolutely.
from other people.
I think, yeah, you really did nail it with community, especially and friendship. It really provides a sense of security. And it's so nice to always know that whenever something happens within family or within your workplace or
Mm-hmm.
within any social group you have in your life, that you can always come back to friends in your community.
Yes.
And I know that we are both quite similar with really prioritizing our girlfriends and
Yes.
making sure we always make time for them, because women have a very special bond and a way of understanding and listening and providing comfort and providing that nurture that that all of us humans need. So can you kind of maybe explain to us like a really special friendship I mean, you have
Oh,
so many
I have so
friendships,
many.
Grandma.
But I think what I'm finding as life goes forth is I always go back to my Mary Pat and my Helens of the world that have been
Mhm.
friends since I've lived here. And still I look back, I just have been meeting recently with some of my old working people, and I haven't worked since 1990 at nursing, but I still have uh, women that I worked with, and I'm still finding them um, just an important part in my life. Probably more so, neighbors are nice, but I'm finding the friendships I have from work settings and from just the years of bonding with good friends. Good friends.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember this is such a funny story because my friend Helen and I, when we were not working because we both had small children at our homes, in our homes, that we used to have, and you wouldn't remember this, but telephones used to be hooked to a wall, and you had to dial them, and then you had this 20-foot stretchy cord. So we frequently would do all of our housework that we could reach with that 20-foot cord while we were talking to one another.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Yes. So even though we were doing that kind of thing, having that ability to communicate with somebody and share how you were feeling and share what you were thinking was also very important.
What's some of your favorite activities that you like to do with your friends right now in Great Falls or across Montana?
Yeah. Well, as I said, that, the COVID really put a damper on all that because we've always been a real social, your Gramps and I have always been a social community that we would go have over for dinner or play games or all of those kinds of things. And when your father and auntie were little, we had like 4 couples, and we'd just go almost weekly to one another's homes, and the kids would always come too. And we'd have dinners. We'd all bring food and just share times and dinners and all of that. So
I love that. How about your weekly wine nights that you have on Wednesdays?
I still have my weekly wine night. Yes. Every Wednesday is my wine night, and it's been going on for 20 years. So
20 years.
Yes.
Wow.
And
it's just so amazing to think about that evolution that you've seen your friends go through so many different stages of their lives. Because I'm 26 right now, and my best friend, Mackenzie, who I've been friends with since we were 6-7 years old, we've come to a point where just the other day we FaceTimed and we looked at each other because we haven't seen each other for the past almost 3 years because of the pandemic and just life. And we looked at each other and we're like, wow, our faces are really changing. Like, it's just funny to think about how I've seen her through childhood, through her teenage years, and her with me as well. And now we're in our mid to late 20s, and thinking about that with you and your girlfriends, you've literally seen them through every stage of life, which is just incredible.
This particular group of friends, we've certainly gone through, in fact, within the last 3 months, one of the women there became a widow. And we've gone through divorces and traumas with children and all of those kinds of things. So it's a good connection that allows us to share our feelings. And that's what I guess we're talking about, Nina, is if you have somebody, and again, I certainly have a spouse I can share feelings with, but I never feel like that sounds not exactly what I meant, but he doesn't have the same response as females do.
Yes.
So it's good. And it's good to learn to be a listener too. And that's a really important lesson because I know so many people who really do not listen, but only if you use that ear. And I think that's one of the things that I learned so profoundly when I was a psychiatric nurse, that you really, really need. And that was the nice part about being a psychiatric nurse. Instead of dealing with a patient who was perhaps comatose, I was dealing with patients who were not. And I like that part of it for me personally, because I was much more of a social person and that kind of thing. So that was, it's interesting how we pick our professions too. And I was able to pick that it worked well for me.
Yeah, it is. I'm interested. You just said I'm really a social person, which is 100% I agree. But I would also say you really, really value your own time by yourself,
I do.
and you need that time by yourself in order to be able to be present, listen, and be there for your friends and family. Can you kind of explain to us? Um, yeah, what that time alone really means to you, what you like to do during your time alone.
Well, I'm an avid reader, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I read a lot um, and actually belong to book clubs, so that's fun too to read for that purpose. But I'm not much of a TV watcher. I find reading gives me a more in depth look at what I'm really interested in. So I think that's a lot of my alone time.
Mm.
I do also, I mean, it's important to me. I like cooking. I like looking at new recipes and trying new recipes. And I have a willing spouse who thinks that's fine with him that I do that. And so that's kind of an important part of my life too, Nina. And I also honestly think that we should never lose that ability to learn new things, and and it keeps the brain a little fresher. And that's something that I particularly worry about. In my late 70s, I'm thinking, because I all of a sudden have a terrible time thinking about remembering a name, for example,
Mm.
and it's
Mhm.
troublesome to me until I talk to other people who are experiencing the same thing. So I think it's probably
Yeah.
more age related, but if it gets worse, I will definitely take some steps to see if I can decide what's going on with me.
Yeah.
The other thing that I do think is important, and I may not do that alone, but I also belong to, I've always belonged to a club where I exercise. And
Mm.
that was one of the sad parts about COVID, because I
Right.
wasn't able to. The gyms were closed, so I've been going back. I've gone to the same person and done yoga for the last 17 years, and then I had about 2 years where I didn't do that, and oh, it's so good. I had yoga class today, and it's just so good. And there isn't a lot of socializing, that in a yoga class. It's much more internal, and that's good. But
Yeah, it is. Oh, I love yoga so, so much. I'm happy that the gym is finally back open for you. I know
yeah.
how important that time in the morning is to
Mhm.
start your day and to start your day present and healthy. I
Yes.
always loved when I saw you, even though you leave at like 5 in the morning. Sometimes I would go with grandma to her morning yoga classes,
Yes,
and
she does.
I hope I will become a morning person someday, but the most, I am such a zombie in the morning. I cannot operate until
Just
at
listen to
least.
your own body. You'll know what you have to do. You know.
That's true.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of listening to your own body, I wanted to also talk to you about health as well as like the food that we eat to nourish and to get our nutrition. And you've kind of had some difficulties with food because you are gluten intolerant
Mhm.
for the past. How many
Yeah,
years has it
I
been?
think it's been at least 25 years now for me.
Right,
So it's
25
been a
years.
time. And it
And
was a relief, to find that diagnosis. So,
yeah, yeah. And I kind of wanted to talk to you because I'm really always trying to figure out what works the best for me food wise
mhm.
to be as healthy but also energetic
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis as possible. Would you recommend to go to a nutritionist, or how did you kind of have that feeling of, oh, I need to figure out what's bothering me with whenever I eat gluten? How did that come to you?
I actually did go to a dietitian because when I first found I had, it's called celiac is what it is.
Mhm.
And again, it's a genetic thing because your aunt has that same thing. And so does one of my nieces. And it really starts affecting our digestive system, but other parts of our body too. So when I started doing the research about that, I did go to a dietitian.
Mm.
And at that time, so many years ago, though, people didn't know as much as they know now about that. There's just a whole bunch of research that's been done. And there's a lot more. First of all, there's gluten-free food available now that was
Yeah.
not even available. I mean, to this day, I read every label as I shop. And but before, you just didn't have any choices. So I, and now, I mean, I try to limit how much animal meat I eat.
Mm.
I try to get protein. In fact, I just had a discussion with a woman who's vegan, and I don't really intend to do that, but I do like the idea that we can survive just fine without animal protein.
Absolutely.
And
Well, we're going to have to learn how to. It's
yeah,
kind of a must, right? We need to, as a world, learn how to reduce the amount of meat that we're
we are.
eating.
We are.
Yeah.
And I'm in favor of that. I just, having grown up on a farm where, first of all, it was all wheat, and secondly, it was animals, it's quite an interesting. It's quite an interesting process for me personally. And I don't necessarily think that I'll be there, but I always, even I would say 2 or 3 times a week, we do not eat meat.
Mm.
But we do have fish. We eat fish. So,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a switch for Montanans too, because Montana, we we don't have any oceans close by, as you know.
Right. Opposite of my situation here in
Yes,
Japan, huh?
it is. So finding good fish, seafood. Um, I'm not necessarily crazy about fish we can catch around here. So, in fact, most of the fish we catch is catch and release. It's more of a game. I mean, it's more of a sport to catch the fish, but
Right.
we personally don't eat them. So,
Yeah. Oh, this reminds me of going fishing with you, Tyga, and Grandpa. I don't know how many years ago, but
a long
quite a
time.
while
And
ago. That was so
you
much.
putting the worm on the hook.
Oh my goodness. Oh, those are my favorite summers. Also, just because I'm thinking about it right now, my so grandma and grandpa would always host a week-long grandkids summer program at their house during our summer vacations in July or August. And this was honestly the most fun part of the summer for all of us grandkids because we would go. Oh my gosh, the activities were limitless. We would go to the state fair in Great Falls. We would make breakfast for dinner. Oh my gosh, we would make so many or bake a lot of sweet food. We would have movie nights. We would prepare a performance because Cameron, my cousin, and I,
Yeah.
we love to dance. So we would perform a dance, and the boys, Keenan, my cousin, and Tyga, my younger brother, would I don't know what they would perform, something not as good as the girls, but
But those are priceless. We still have video of those too.
videos. Oh, so, so special. So, Grams, I wrote down specifically the lessons that you've taught me.
Oh,
And I want to list them, but kind of go through each one individually and kind of discuss why you've taught me them and what you think. So the first, I'll list them first. So the first one is gratitude. The second lesson is learning, be a constant lifelong learner.
mhm.
The third is self-care. The fourth is forgiveness. And the fifth is it will always be okay. I you know. So those are kind of the main lessons that I truly feel like you've taught me throughout my life. And let's go back to the first one, which is gratitude. I really I really admire how whenever life gets tough, whether it's what we've been going through with this pandemic or if there's some family crisis going on, you always just say, well, look at what you have and look at what is really working though in your life. This might seem like it's really, really difficult right now, but look at all the beauty though that's also with you. And can you kind of explain also your kind of ritual, I guess, of gratitude? And do you write down gratitude lists?
I do, actually.
Yes.
It's interesting that you say that, because that is one of the things that I don't necessarily have a long list, but I have a place where I will write down. And I have so much to be. In fact, one of them is right now, our dog is at the door because she doesn't like the fact that I'm here. I'm so grateful to have our little dog. Here she comes. Yeah. Let her say hi to you.
Yeah, let's see Greta. Hello, Miss Greta.
So, isn't she fun?
Yeah. She's so cute.
So anyway, Nina, I think gratitude is something that particularly I've always realized how fortunate I am in life. Again, as I told you about my upbringing, and also just the fact that I live in a beautiful state, and I have this financially, I can pretty much do what I want. We're not wealthy, obviously, but I've never had a great number of needs. So, and I find it particularly interesting now during pandemic times when there is a kind of a desire for us to say, oh my God, is this ever going to be ever? We can go on with all the things that we don't like about it. So that's when that's when reading or watching the news is all I need to do. I need to do. And there's, oh my gosh, this could be something that would happen. And even tonight, watching weather things that have happened and people who have had their entire life wiped out by a tornado or something. So I guess the response to that is enjoy, appreciate what you have with gratitude, and also understand that those things can change very quickly, and they do, many people. And so always kind of keep yourself grounded enough to know that if that happens, you will go on. You will figure out how to make the best. And the older we get, the more losses we have.
Yeah.
And those are always incredibly sad. But by the same token, we still have our daily life to be grateful for. So that's kind of a response to that first one.
I love that. It's so beautiful. Gratitude. So the second one is lifelong learning. Always just be eager to learn. And I think this is something that I strongly believe connects us the most. Actually, our relationship, whenever we talk on the phone, it's always, most of the conversation revolves around something that I'm learning at my graduate school, or my grandma's reading in her book club, or something like that. But we're just natural learners. And I also think that comes with our ability to be really good listeners when talking to people, because I always see a conversation as a story and lesson. And therefore, if I'm able to listen and not talk as much, but listen, there's so much more that I'm learning and getting out of it. And I think that's sometimes hard for people, because as humans, we really want to try to impress and be the one that has the most to say and always seem like we know the most. But I really have learned from you that sometimes the smartest person in the room is the one that's the quietest and is the one that's listening and asking the most questions. So, can you kind of go through? Well, I don't really know what to say about this one, but I guess what does education and learning really
Well,
mean to you?
I again, uh, as you're talking, I'm thinking, look at your dad. He's been a perpetual learner. And look at
Yeah.
your auntie, a perpetual learner. And your grandpa, for gosh sake, if I could tell you all the different businesses that he has learned and done, it's just incredible. And so I think by example that I've kind of known that this is what makes me tick. And if I
Mm,
ever get to the point where I'm not interested in doing that, then I, I think that would be a very sad time for me. So
that's awesome.
I'm not sure what motivates that, but I think part of it is just example of knowing that that works for people, and
Yeah.
the people that are usually depressed or down or upset about something is because they've lost that need in their life or that desire in their life to go forth, and
Mm,
and I think learning uh, kind of forces us to go forth. I mean,
yeah.
there's another book to read. There's something
Always.
always that you could,
Always.
yeah. I mean, I just finished reading a book about bullfighting. Now, I don't think that's what
Both.
don't I don't think I'm going to go into that. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so funny. But I love like the topic range too, even though like for me too, I am on in this specific field,
yeah,
international relations and politics, but that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in technology or psychology or
yeah.
food, cooking, and like so many different topics really do intrigue me. But you also see like the connection between everything, right?
Yes,
And that's fun to
it-
talk about too.
yeah. That's a really good way of saying it because everything is because if you have that desire to cook, for example, what do you want to do? You want to share. You want to share
Right.
it. And then you share a recipe. And then that person is going to say, oh, but have you, so there's always that kind of ongoing information exchange. And then
Mm-hmm.
that alone gives you that kind of nudge to say, oh,
Mm.
what a good idea. I think I could
Yeah.
do that, but maybe I'll do it a little different. That whole,
Yes. Oh, so, so good. So that's the second big lesson. Third is, and we kind of went over this with
hmm
our talk, but the importance of self-care and really prioritizing yourself, making sure that you're okay before you go have that difficult conversation with a family member or a friend or someone in your work environment. I I do always remember when I would talk to you about difficult times in my life, and the thing that you would always say to me, Grams, is, "Well, have you taken a shower? Have you eaten? Have you rested?" And you always go through the basic, you
yes,
know, things that humans need to do for themselves in order to be okay. So I feel like self care is just something that you have and you've led by example for a lot of people based on your lifestyle of working out, your community and friendships, having really good relationships with the people that you love, you're eating healthy. You Has this always been a part of your life, like this kind of self-care, or did you develop it more later on?
it's a really interesting question, Nina, but I also can tell you in all honesty that the friends I have fit in that same category. And
Mm,
as you're speaking, I'm thinking about a dear, dear friend of mine right now who is, and she stopped by yesterday, and her husband is very ill. And I just looked at her and I said, "Oh, you are not taking care of yourself. I'm more worried about you because," and so we sat and talked about things and then I followed up today and just said, okay, I could tell you her name and you would know her, but are you, how are you doing? Are you moving? You are isolating yourself? So I'm thinking I have some influence, and I know people will do that to me if they see that I'm in need. So it's that, again, that give and take that you learn as life goes on. You're going to have, people personally will find friends who will support them in return for you supporting them. It's a
Yeah.
give and take, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Reciprocity. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. So I can't say that there's a time when all of a sudden it's just the culture that I grew up in, that we were always helping neighbors.
Mm.
And certainly when you're a farm kid, farmers know they can't do everything alone. So they always need others helping them. So that's one thing. But you can only help if you're taking care of yourself too.
Yes.
So
100%. You
yeah,
could only help if you're taking care of yourself.
yes.
Yes. That is so, so important. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to quote you, Grandma.
Are you? Well,
Yeah, I'm
that's
going to
not
quote.
exactly earth shattering, but
I think it's earth shattering. Okay,
it,
so we just talked about gratitude, learning, self-care. So this fourth lesson, I don't know if we've actually talked too much about this together, Grams, but I really have learned this through you. It's forgiveness.
yeah.
And let me explain. So
Mm.
I'm just going to think, I'm going to specifically um, give examples within our family where, I mean, I could give examples with my brother or dad. It's kind of whenever we get frustrated, Grams, it's sometimes towards the guys, or usually towards the guys in our family. And whenever I talk to you about my frustrations, um, I always feel like you have so much wisdom in the world of like forgiveness and letting go,
Mm.
because you know that holding on to that frustration and pain and anger towards the other person is actually doing you a disservice.
It is.
So, I mean, I'm still really practicing forgiveness. I'm much better than I was, I would say, during my teenage years, thank goodness. But forgiveness is, I think, something that is hard for any age, anyone to do when you are hurt by someone else. Um, I guess
Mm.
it's kind of the same question, but has forgiveness been something that's been
Yeah,
easy
it's
for you
interesting
in your
that
life
you
or
even
hard
bring
for
that
you?
up because I don't even think of that as being part of my life. But
Mm,
I also work really hard at, and it's usually a person, something a person will have done or said that will
right.
be upsetting to you. And so, with me personally, and all I need to do is say, but I'm not walking in their shoes. And I know that that has a lot to do with it. And they're not walking in my shoes either. So I can't always say that there's one simple answer about forgiveness. And I think it's interesting that you see that I'm a forgiving person, because I'm certainly
Mm,
capable of getting angry,
yeah.
and but it's not an ongoing thing. I don't have anybody that I can say I never want to see this person again in my life. That isn't even in my thoughts. And
Right.
the only person I can think of that right now is I just so distressed by what's going on in the Ukraine, and
Right.
so I can be very angry about that, but I have no control over any of that.
Yes.
So that was way out there when I said that. But as far as our personal, and you put it nicely, Nina. You said that if we can't forgive something, it's hardest on us. It's hard on us. It actually hurts us more. And somewhere along the line, I've known that lesson for a long, long time, perhaps even having learned it from my own parents.
Mm.
You're hanging on to that anger, and you're hanging on to um, it's eating you inside, and that's not healthy. So trying, as we just talked about, to walk through those things that um, will help you diffuse that anger in yourself and that anger that you have towards
Absolutely.
somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you said it. It's so important also to put yourselves in the other person's shoes
Mm-hmm.
and to understand where they're coming from. When you're young, and I'm thinking about myself in childhood when I'm sure you would remember I wasn't like the happiest
No.
baby little girl. I really would hang on to things that people would say that upset me, hurt me, scared me, and I wouldn't let it go. I would just hold it on. And I think that's why, Grandma, I was never like the most friendly, happy kid, honestly. But I really did start to learn growing up, though, this idea of not letting things eat you alive because it really does, it really changes everything in your life. Um, and also, what you were saying, yes, going back to the point of putting yourself on the other person's shoes, it's even if the other person seems like they're like liking this pain that they're inflicting on someone or they're not as angry or upset at it, just know that all humans are so complicated and how we process pain and anger, it really depends on the case and the person. So, yeah, I guess main point is perspective, putting yourself on the other person's shoes, know that everyone's going through a battle.
Yes, yes. And that's
Yeah,
so true. It's very true that we just don't know what's going in, going on inside that person.
exactly. Yeah.
And we don't understand it either, Nina. I mean, that's what frequently something will occur, and your grandson will just say, "What were they thinking? What
Right.
possibly?" So some of that we just have to let go. But if for people that are important in our life, uh, we need to figure out how to resolve it in some way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But that does lead to that fifth lesson that it will always be okay that you've taught me. Like
I,
I've heard, I just always have that voice, and it's your voice, Grandma, in my head when things are going a little bit shaky or my life's getting a little bit
Mhm.
rattly. Like I have that voice, and I think it definitely is your voice that's like, it will always be okay.
I'm
Don't
happy.
worry, it will always be
Yeah.
okay. Because it is usually, not always, but usually it will always be okay. It will be, right?
I agree. And I've even heard that today I was reading something about a woman who was in well, it was a woman it was working with me about some of my health issues. And she was saying that the pain was so great that she almost said, I would rather be not have the pain and instead of, you know, having that pain, not being able to walk the rest of my life would be easier. And I thought, isn't that an interesting thing? That pain was that severe for her that she said spending her life in a wheelchair would have been easier. And isn't I just took that home with me and I thought, wow, can you imagine that kind of pain that she would have been going through?
No.
Luckily for her, it was resolved by a procedure she had done. But I just think, and there are things. Imagine being in her shoes and having to
Yeah.
say, okay, I don't care if I can't walk anymore. Just get rid of this pain.
Oh
So,
my.
it's I was able to put myself in her shoes and thinking, oh my God, never have I been there. Never, ever. So
Wow.
interesting life lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much for all of these life lessons. For the last question and kind of last, I guess, words that I want to hear from you before we end is for the young people, especially that will be listening in on this, what is, it could be one message, and it could be a combination of what we discussed in this podcast, but one message about life that you'd like to convey and for people to remember?
First of all, I think people need to understand that we're all really strong. That frequently we think, oh, I just can't do that. But you can figure out methods to do it. It might not be exactly what you had envisioned, but gosh, this is so lame to say that, but don't give up.
That is not lame, Grandma. That is not, okay, cliches are there for a reason. They carry deep, deep truth.
Yes.
I totally agree.
Yes.
They do.
So not giving up is really important. And, keep telling yourself that.
I will. Everyone will. Don't give up. And I 100% agree with you with that strength. All humans possess strength that we think we don't have in the moment, but we really do. And it's so amazing to, I think back on yourself or family members or friends that you were able to identify that strength within them. And that in turn gives you that kind of confidence and idea of, oh yeah, I can do whatever I set myself to, or I know I can get over this. I'm going to be able to overcome this battle or whatever it is. So I think strength is such a important thing to remember, especially nowadays with everything that's going on in the world. But Grandma, I just want to say thank you so much for being able to be my first guest on Light of Insight. It was such a pleasure to have you be the first one I was able to have a conversation with, and your story is so beautiful. And now we'll always be able to look back on this conversation between us, and I'm so happy.
And honestly, Nina, I'm honored that you asked me to do this. So thank you. Thank you. And you have a good rest of the day, and I will have a good night.
I know. It's a good night to you. Love you so much, Grams. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.